that team in the process of those designs being made. So we would just expect them to understand our vision for everything. And you can't communicate it if you're not directly working with them. So we would just get the final product and then it would go through rounds and rounds of revisions. So when I started building up my own organization, it was really heavily focused on whenever we have a client, we place one person who is best for that project from each area that's needed, and then they work directly with each other on that project, and they all communicate and make sure that the vision is aligned in all aspects.
Yeah, on my side, I truly believe that marketing and sales teams should communicate all the time. And in my past experience, we got into a lot of silos where the marketing team was not communicated with the sales team and vice versa. And the sales team expected us just to know what they need, and we expected us just to know what is our strategy. And with that being said, I learned that it's very important to communicate with each other if we want to succeed and grow the business. Exactly. Otherwise, it's just a fail.
I can't agree more. I mean, there's so many businesses that I worked in where sales was completely separated out from marketing. And I'm a very data analytical type of marketer. So I want to know not only that I drove in those leads, but how those leads did and how they performed for the sales development teams or call centers, how they performed for the sales teams, what went to sale and what contributed from marketing to that sale. Absolutely. And if you're not consistently getting that feedback from sales and those analytics of where they're actually going, how do you optimize your marketing campaigns to make them better for what's going to actually produce on the other side?
Absolutely, you're just guessing.
Those forms don't exist for no reason. They ask you, where did you find us, for a reason. It's so that the marketers can understand what was working.
Yep.
Especially have that client feedback, because sales are like directly communicated with clients, so they can give us their feedback.
Where was the first touch point?
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
So we're talking a lot about communication as a cure to silos, but we're more divided than ever, literally and physically. We're not even working in the same places, so it's not like, oh, hey, I'm going to come over to your desk and say, don't forget, this is what's going on. So what do? How do we actually communicate with one another when we're in different time zones, countries, parts of our lives?
Honestly, software. I mean, everyone knows, oh, this could have been another email, right, that was sent, but most of the time...
That's my favorite meme, by the way.
It is, but it's the reason why it's not an email most of the time is because people skim emails, and people don't pay attention to their emails, or we get thousands and thousands of emails as executives, and you don't have time to read all of them. And so my team personally, we do, my marketing team, we meet 3 times a week. One of those is a training session to make sure that they're understanding the other parts of the business and what they're seeing. And then we use Jira to manage all of our tasks and making sure that each department, not just my marketing team is in Jira, but the development team and the management team, so that we can all see and grasp what's going on within the business. And then Google Meet and Slack for making sure that we're consistently communicating with one another and understanding what each other need.
It's also difficult sometimes because you want to have all of these meetings and you don't want to do everything through email, and sometimes people aren't available when you're in different time zones and different areas. So it's also about like finding that balance for people where they can maintain their mental health as well. Because like having all of these remote meetings, like they can take hours and hours and hours, and I have a problem with meetings sometimes because I feel like my work doesn't start until after the meeting. So there's finding that balance. I mean, at Ekte, we use Asana a lot. So for each client, we make a portfolio for them, and then each project within that client's portfolio like has the assigned members, and then they collaborate and communicate, and they have like who is doing certain parts of a single deliverable, and then they communicate through groups on Slack, and it works so incredibly well.
I absolutely agree, meetings are really important, but we need to have meetings with
Purpose.
Absolutely. Yes. Because having just meetings every day won't work. It will keep the silo going on. So it's very important to know the purpose of the meeting and just make sure we stay aligned within the time and within the purpose, and after the meeting, just have actions for each member of the team. That's very important. And if someone is not supposed to be in the meeting, just don't get him in there. You can send him an email to inform him if you don't need any action from that person. But if you need the person, to put her hands on the project, yes, the person needs to be in the meeting. And in terms of software, I totally agree. For my side, we work with Asana, which is a very good project management, and Google Team or Zoom or Teams with Microsoft, anything, just keep the communication going on within internal and external teams. That's very important, because between departments, we need to have that touch point. If just take an event, let's say a congress for a business. You do have the sales team who's going to be in there. You do have the finance team who's going to be in there. You do have the customer service team and the marketing team. All of these people have to meet and talk on their strategy. How are they going to present the product? How are they going to promote the product? And each person can give different how can I say that? It's a different angle on how to deal with the Congress.
If I can just add to the sales part of that, what we've found works really well is assigning a salesperson to a certain client, because then we're getting constant feedback. And you're also making sure that they have a touch point where they don't feel like they have to insult the marketer by going directly to them, because then clients won't give honest feedback. So that's breaking down that silo a little bit between the actual organization and the clients.
Absolutely.
I think meetings ought to be 50 minutes long instead of an hour, so we can time to go to the bathroom or get a cup of coffee. Not always good at that myself, but I've worked out of my home for a decade and a half, and I kind of miss being in an office with people, but I like the commute. That works really well for me. So there's a trade-off, and that part of that trade-off is, and thank God we have the technology now to do it. We have things like Zoom, and our company uses Microsoft Teams, which can break things down by project, and we do have project teams, and when we're producing events, we sometimes have upwards of 50-some odd people all doing a different job on that project. And we use Monday.com and some of the things like that to help manage those projects and communicate with the client, because none of us are in the same place except for some folks who are in the shop building things. Everybody else is working from their home. It's just the way the organization works. And I haven't yet found a way around having those meetings, but I do think that we can be a little more mindful of those meetings. I think we're struggling, but getting better at having only the people who need to be on the meeting and not everybody and their brother, because we might need them, because that's a very costly thing to do. So we have the technology, doesn't mean we should be using it for everything. We need to be using it judiciously so we're efficient in what we're doing.
Also, people are being paid for their time. As a leader, we want to make sure that the time is used effectively.
For sure.
Exactly, they're working on the business. Leaders, you want working on the business, not in the business so much. A little bit, because, as a leader, I like working in the business a little bit. I don't like pulling myself completely out of it.
I don't look at the clock as a leader. I feel like that's the difference. So we need to consider the people who actually are looking at the clock.
And just make sure that they feel okay and they feel efficient.
They don't always think the same way that we do.
Well, I think that part of the silo aspect is a lot of employees, like you said, don't feel heard or don't feel seen in that aspect. And so when you're thinking about them being on the clock versus us, it does take a toll on them, where they feel like, oh, I had all these meetings and I couldn't get stuff done because I know. Oh, sorry, I pressed the mic. So just like you, my work doesn't start until after all my meetings. So I have meetings from 6 a.m. till 3 p.m. every day, and then I start work.
Then you work until 11.
And then but I would never expect that out of my employees. My employees all send stuff at 2 a.m. They respond. I'm like, don't ever respond to me. You are not on the clock. But there's a lot of, with those silos, I feel like a lot of employees don't feel heard, because a lot of managers expect them to respond when you're sending them messages or anything. And that can create those silos because they feel like they have to internalize everything.
I have to like preface every message, and I send a lot of stuff in the middle of the night.
Yeah,
I always have to preface it with like, at the start, do not worry about this until the morning. It's like, they're human beings, you know?
Yeah.
Like, we don't think of ourselves as human beings as leaders. Like, we really have so much less respect for ourselves than we have for our employees most of the time.
That's a whole other panel. We can dig into that one. That's a good one. I like that.
I was going to say, wow, we're about to get into it deep. But no, that's actually, Renee, you brought up a great point. How do we incentivize our employees to be bought into collaboration and communication? Because it doesn't come naturally. By the way, this is not something that is easy. If it was, we wouldn't be having a panel talking about it. So what kind of reward mechanisms are there for us to actually encourage them to feel bought in? And maybe it is starting with hearing them.
I don't think you need to reward somebody for that. I think it's a matter of like, on day one, they should already feel very in line with the vision and the mission of the company, so that they are like directly motivated to make everything work. And I've noticed, like, I don't have to force anyone to communicate. It's like they feel attached to the mission, and so they want to work hard to make it successful. So I don't think that it's a matter of like incentivizing with rewards. I think it's a matter of just supporting them, giving them what they need at all times, and making them feel like they are a part of the bigger picture and not just a piece of the big moving machine.
Absolutely, and it's also very important to show them the examples. I mean, we're their leader, we're their director or manager. It's okay to tell them what to do, but you have to show them. And I think that's very important, and a lot of leaders sometimes forget that. And transparency is very important also. I think that's kind of a reward. Be transparent with your team, and make them feel part of a bigger picture.
Sometimes when I'm training people, I'll do their job for them for the first couple weeks.
Absolutely.
Well, I think that is towards the leading by example as well, because if they, I believe this with a lot of my employees, if I'm willing to say that they have to do something, I have to be willing to get in the trenches and do it with them. And so I think that helps with them understanding that it's important for communication, because they're willing to see that the executive team also is willing to do the exact same things. And if you as an executive are saying,
You're too good for it.
Yeah, you're supposed to collaborate and everything, but you're so pulled back and you're so unavailable, why should they make themselves available to everyone else if you're not doing the exact same thing?
I think that's really super important, and even one step further, have them in the room when you're laying out the direction of the organization. Have them be part of the conversation. Don't have to necessarily take all of their ideas, but if they're there and they're contributing, or representatives, depending, it's a big organization, you can't have 800 people trying to figure out what your values are, but you can have. I was actually on a committee for our company when we rebranded last year to identify the values of the organization. And I was very grateful to be able to be part of that. But there were a number of other people at all different levels of the organization who were part of that process. So now the whole company is kind of, in a way, part of defining our values as a company. Now the leaders still have to say yes or no, and yes, that makes sense, but it still came from the team, and it's like, okay, I'm all in when I feel like I'm really part of it.
Absolutely.
So do you think having a vision statement and common objectives can actually break down silos?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If they're part of it.
Yeah.
You can't just slap it on a wall and hope for the best, because that's not going to work. But you have to, if they're part of that process of creating it and revising it or updating it, and that's communicated regularly.
And just remind them.
Yeah.
Sometimes we forget. We forget where we're going. And sometimes we just have to adapt. I mean, if the market changes, if something happens. So keep reminding them why we're doing this.
It's also like building a marketing strategy using the communication from the sales team, for example. Like, they can give you all the input in the beginning, take all of the input that they have, include them in the conversation. but the leader has the final say. We don't just tell them what to do and then hear their feedback afterwards. We hear it first and then use it to make that final decision. And then they'll be happy to do it because they were a part of that.
I think that it's great when you can start a business like that, right? But there is a lot of businesses out there where there are these silos that are already created that, I mean, I don't know how many companies I was in where, or I in marketing knew what the vision statement was and the mission because that's marketing's job. But you go to an operations person, you go to a salesperson, you go to developers, they don't know because it's not regularly, like you said, it's not regularly reminded of them and it's not told to them. So there's this vision and mission that's created for brand purpose, but it's not created for the employee purpose. And I think that breaking down silos is going to be understanding that your employees are your customers too. You have your base customers and you have your employees, which is your other customer, and you have to treat them like a customer in that sense that they need to know you just as well as a customer would.
And employees can leave. They don't have to stay. Like, we need to treat them like people and show them that they matter because they're not obliged to do everything we say if they don't align with it.
This is all coming down to a conversation about culture. You know, what's the culture of the organization? And when there's a culture of inclusiveness, of acceptance, of understanding, of we're all in this together, then those silos can break down. But if you're not and that culture is created at the top. There's just, when silos exist, you don't have to look much further than senior leadership. That's where the silos begin, and that's if they're committed to a culture, a certain kind of a culture within their organization, then that's what you get. And if you have silos, you know that's what they're committed to, because it's a fact. You know, it's like, I'm not committed to weighing 175 pounds because I don't, you know. I'm committed to weighing 195 pounds because that's what I weigh, you know. I mean, so I don't want to weigh 195. I'd rather weigh 175 pounds, but I can't wish that. I have to do something about it. So my commitment is clear, right? Okay, so I just bared my soul to y'all, okay? but that's the truth of any organization. If there's silos, that's what the leadership's committed to. And they can bang their head against their wall all day long, but until they do something, it's not going to change.
Well, and it's interesting too because we have a mix of people who have founded their own organizations and those who have rose through the ranks in this panel. What do you do when you're in an organization where silos already exist and you're given a leadership position and it's your job to break down those silos?
And you're looking at me now,
I'm looking at you so specifically right now.
Yeah. Well, and that did happen, of course. So I have 2 different production teams that, as the company grew, different groups within the company kind of came together, and it actually sort of crystallized a little bit, and they're like, okay, so this is who we are, this is what we're moving forward with. And so event production became a real thing within a company that previously was known for being a general contractor for trade shows. Okay, so they're really, really good at it, global leader, all that sort of thing, but now we're doing corporate events. So what does that mean? So now we have these people who are really good at doing expos. Unbelievable, beautiful expo experiences, you know, kind of like what we see in the other room, but we're talking about, you know, just gorgeous for some major brands. And then we had this other group of people that could produce meetings, general sessions, activations, holiday thing, you know, $1 million holiday activations within malls. Like all these like really complex, our company toured a Harry Potter exhibition around the world for 11 years. You know, just these weird, fun, cool, unique, like these folks could do, like, give them anything to do, they'll figure it out. These folks did these expos really clearly, but they did not mix. But there are so many great things that this expo team knew how to do that they could share with the other team and vice versa. And until I was able to sort of break through the leadership of those teams that were assigned to me to show them how much value there was doing it, that they began to come together. And now there's a lot more cross-pollination. Interestingly, we're getting more projects that are all of those things and not just one of those things, right? So, because we're working together. So it's taken a number of years to do it because it's an old established company and they're, you know, firm in their ways. But it can be done through opening up communication through having, I spent a little time on this. I had a meeting with all of them. It was like 25 of them, different, again, from different worlds. And we did an improv class, essentially. We got them all relying on each other just through improv and laughing together and having a blast and getting a little out of their shell. And it was scary for some of them, and others were right there all over it. But then they all knew each other as people, not that other team. And when you know each other as people, as individuals, somebody you'd like to hang out with, then all of a sudden it's easy to give them a call and say, hey, how do you do this? You know, our expos are so much better because we have technical production involved in them now, and we didn't have that before. And we were relying on our vendors to handle all of it. And our live events are so much better because we found new ways to build things and create things, and you know, using fabric and frames and things that we never knew about in the live side of things. So it was it's hugely beneficial when we start to see each other as people that can help. And that's really all. I mean, most people are that, I think. I'm a person, I'd like to help. If I'm helping you, that's great. You know, I'm happy.
How do you find people's humanity over Zoom?
That's a very deep question.
Well, and just so everyone knows, we all met last night. We all had dinner together, and you know, over the course of this 2-hour dinner, we found so many things in common, like that we love Star Wars, or that we love Legos, that there's a bunch of theater kids on this stage. But we wouldn't have known that. You know, we actually did have a Zoom call, and we were all like, this is very nice. And then we had this dinner, and now we all know each other on such a different level. But how do you do that when you can't get together in person?
So I think that a lot of times, and this happens within my org as well, where you jump into a Zoom call and the first thing you always dive into is meetings. You don't ask how the people are doing. You don't know, how was your weekend? Oh, you went with your wife to the golf course. Great. Like, you don't humanize it. You treat them like they're robots that are there to just do a task and get off the meeting. And yes, you have to be careful about the meeting aspect to not run too long, but unless you truly care for those employees, you're not going to find that humanity in a Zoom meeting. And so I try and start most of my team meetings with, how are you guys doing? How are you feeling? Did you do anything fun last week? Right? Trying to really learn more about them. Most of my employees, I know, I've seen pictures of their kids. We talk about like parental advice on the side. We have great conversations about like our fandoms and everything else. Like, I've learned so much about my employees that I wouldn't normally, because I've made that conscious decision to start my meetings in that direction. And it also opens them up to feel like, oh, they actually care, which I do. It's not a farce, but that the leadership actually cares about who they are, and they're not just another number in the system.
I think, like, yes, it's hard to meet in person, but I think that there needs to be a priority on every now and then, even if it's very unoften, bringing people together in person for a short period of time where it's solely focused on being present and connecting. Like, I've noticed at the last organization I was in, when I would fly out and I would be with everyone, it improved my sentiment so much. I was an employee there, even though I was a leader. So just doing that, and I've noticed even on this trip, my team works remote. We've all gotten so close, we're all so happy. And I know that when we go back home, our work is going to improve so much because we're gonna be more comfortable communicating. So yes, it's important to make a big effort over Zoom, but it's never ever going to replace just like a short, like small investment for like once in a while, you know?
Mm-hmm. I agree. In Canada during COVID, we couldn't meet at all. Mm-hmm. So one thing we did in my company is that we had brainstorming sessions with the whole marketing team and the sales team, and a graphic designer can still give a great social media strategy. A sales team can still give a great graphic design visual. So that's something that really helped to get people, you know, to give their opinion, because employees are also consumers. They can consume your product, they can consume your service, so they have quite great ideas. Listen to them, use them. And I think as a leader during those sessions, you can just act as a moderator and just let people speak and express themselves.
I actually did a thing after COVID. We built our team back up again because we cut down to bare bones. And when they all came back, a lot of new people hadn't met each other, so we had a big Zoom call, 20-some people, and we just did very, very simple, like icebreaker kind of things, like go around and tell us who you are, where you're from, what your job is, and something that we probably don't know about you. So they would do that, and then there'd be giggles. Some people who would just like do the bare minimum, other people who would talk a little longer, but everybody got their voice in there. And then it just occurred to me in the moment, actually, I said, okay, because we had some time left, I said, let us all know, give a shout out to somebody else on this call that you've worked with and something that they did, just really quick, like 2 minutes, give somebody else a shout out for what they did. And they were just like piling the praise on each other for the next 20 minutes. And it was so amazing. It was so great to see. And there were many people who had never met each other who now had a sense of who that guy is or who that woman is. And it's like, yeah, I want to work with them, and let's find a project we can do something together on. And it was really, it was pretty cool in an hour, it was fun.
Okay, so let's do a last question, then open for any Q&A. Yeah. So we are all leaders here, but what if you're an employee in an organization? What can you do to encourage this? How can you go to your boss and bring some of these ideas?
I think a quick answer, since our time's short, is you don't necessarily need to go to your boss. Just reach out to somebody else that you don't know and say, hey, I heard some interesting work that you're doing. I want to know about what you do. Very simple.
I did this at my last organization when I was a leader there for the employees, but every quarter we would do a anonymous survey, and it would have all the questions of like, what would make your job more fulfilling? How do you feel that leadership is doing? Like, so that leadership would take it to the boardroom and we would see, oh my gosh, we didn't even know that we were messing up in these areas.
I think that really quickly, I think it would be if you are an employee and you feel like you can't pass those barriers, like Jeff said, right? Just bringing it up to your manager, be like, hey, I would really like to speak to the sales department because I want more feedback on what we're doing to help our campaigns and lower our CPLs or something like that.
That's something also when I joined one of the company in the past, first thing that I did is spoke to each department just to understand what they do and understand how they want us to collaborate. So that's something that can help.
Well, I think it's really important to realize that not only do we manage our teams, but they manage us, right? And we have to, as employees, and this is with internal silos, external, we have to be able to manage up that chain too, and to insert ourselves in the conversations. Because if you sit around and ask, why am I not being included in this conversation? It's because they don't know that you want to be part of it often.
Yeah,
really true.
Any parting thoughts on silos, collaboration, and why it's so important?
I have one. I think just overall, we need to start giving our employees a safe space to correct us and showing them that we are not too good for them. That's a stereotype in the corporate world, and that they are humans and they are way more important than we are even. Without them, we can't do anything.
Okay, well, thank you guys so much. Can we get a round of applause for our amazing panelists? And then we have about time for maybe one question, one or two if anyone has any, or we will be available afterwards if you guys want to come up and talk to us. Awesome. Okay, thank you guys again. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you.